You have been talking your way out of power your entire life and you did not even realize it. Every time you tried to explain yourself, every time you made your case with logic and reason, every time you laid your cards on the table hoping transparency would earn you respect, you were bleeding influence. You thought words were your weapon. They were your wound. The more you spoke, the more you exposed. The more you explained, the more you surrendered. And while you were busy constructing careful arguments, someone else was watching your breathing, your posture, your eye contact, and they were reading you like a book you handed them for free. Here is the truth that will rearrange how you move through the world. The person who speaks the most controls the least. The person who explains the most is trusted the least. And the person who needs to be understood the most is the person who has no power at all. Words are the weapon of the weak. Silence is the throne of the powerful. This is not a metaphor. This is a mechanism. And today you are going to learn exactly how it works. What I am about to walk you through is not self-help. This is not communication advice. This is the ruthless art Machiavelli perfected, stripped down to its operating principles, and handed to you so that you never again walk into a room and leave it with less power than you entered. There are 7 psychological mechanisms that let you control any situation without saying a word. Each one exploits a vulnerability that every human being carries, including the people who think they are in charge of you. By the end of this, you will understand something that most people never grasp in their entire lives. Control is not about what you say. Control is about what you make other people feel in the space you create by not saying anything. Let us begin. Number 1. Strategic silence makes people reveal themselves. Most people are terrified of silence. They experience it as a void, an absence, a hole that must be filled immediately with words, any words, whatever words come to hand. And because they are terrified of it, they will do anything to escape it. They will over-explain. They will overshare. They will negotiate against themselves. They will confess things they never intended to say. They will make concessions they were not prepared to make. All because you did something that costs you nothing. You stayed quiet. Here is what happens in a conversation when one person is comfortable with silence and the other person is not. The uncomfortable person starts to feel that the silence means something. They start to interpret it. They think you are judging them. They think you disagree. They think you know something they do not know. And so they start talking faster, adding details, clarifying, justifying, offering more information than was asked. Every word they add is a piece of themselves they are handing over. Every clarification is a weakness they are exposing. Every justification is a position they are abandoning. And you have not said a single word. You just sat there. This is the first and most fundamental power move in the Machiavellian playbook. You create discomfort by withdrawing, and discomfort makes people move. They move toward you. They move toward your position. They move toward whatever they think will fill the silence and restore equilibrium. The strategic person understands that silence is not empty. Silence is a pressure. It is a force. It pushes people to fill it, and what they fill it with is information you can use against them later. Think about what this has been costing you. Every time you rushed to fill a pause in a conversation, you gave away your position. Every time you answered a question too quickly, you signaled that you were eager, that you needed their approval, that you were afraid of what their silence might mean. Every time you explained yourself before being asked, you told them you did not trust your own position to stand on its own. You have been volunteering your weaknesses and calling it honesty. You have been handing over your leverage and calling it communication. Stop. The next time someone makes you an offer, a demand, or an accusation, do not respond immediately. Let the silence sit. Watch what happens to their face. Watch their body shift. Watch them start to talk themselves into a worse position than the one they opened with. You do not need to argue. You do not need to counter. You just need to not fill the void. Most people will negotiate against themselves if you simply let them. They will lower their price. They will soften their demand. They will reveal their real motivation. They will tell you what they actually want, which is almost never what they initially said they wanted. All because you held your tongue. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike the person who wronged you. But there is a deeper layer. The best revenge is to remain unmoved while they unravel. Silence is not passive. Silence is the most active thing you can do in a conversation because it forces the other person to act. It forces them to reveal. It forces them to expose. And it costs you nothing. Remember this. The person who can tolerate silence longer controls the conversation. That is not an opinion. That is a law of human psychology. And you are going to start using it today. Number 2. Weaponized absence creates uncontrollable desire. This is where most people completely misunderstand how human attraction and influence work. They believe that being present, being available, being consistently there for someone builds connection and loyalty. It does the opposite. Constant presence breeds familiarity. Familiarity breeds contempt. Contempt kills desire. And without desire, you have no influence. Think about the people in your life who are always available to you. The ones who answer every text immediately. The ones who are always free when you want to see them. The ones who never make you wonder whether they will show up. How much do you value them? Be honest. You take them for granted. You do not chase them. You do not think about them when they are not around. You do not wonder what they are doing or who they are with. They are a constant, and constants are invisible. We only notice what changes. We only desire what we might lose. We only chase what moves away from us. This is not a character flaw. This is how the human brain is wired. When something is always there, the brain categorizes it as background. When something disappears, the brain categorizes it as important. Absence signals importance. Presence signals safety. And safety is the enemy of desire. Here is the mechanism. When you withdraw from someone after establishing a connection, their brain does something predictable and exploitable. It starts to fill the gap you left. They start thinking about you. They start wondering why you pulled back. They start replaying conversations. They start imagining what you might be doing. They start creating narratives about your absence. And every narrative they create makes you more important in their mind. You are not even there, and you are occupying more of their mental space than you did when you were constantly available. This is what Robert Greene understood when he described the coquette archetype. The coquette is the master of strategic withdrawal. They give warmth, then they take it away. They create a connection, then they create distance. And in that distance, desire does not fade. It intensifies. Because the target is no longer responding to the person. They are responding to the absence of the person. And absence is always more powerful than presence because presence can be evaluated, but absence can only be imagined. And imagination always produces something more compelling than reality. Now think about what this means for you. If you are the person who is always reachable, always responsive, always available, you have been training everyone around you to take you for granted. You have been teaching them that you are a constant. That you will be there regardless of how they treat you. That they do not need to invest in the relationship because you will carry it for both of you. And what has it gotten you? Being liked. Not being respected. Being relied upon. Not being desired. Being present. Not being valued. There is a difference between being liked and being respected, and most people spend their entire lives pursuing the wrong one. Being liked is easy. Being liked just requires that you never inconvenience anyone, never challenge anyone, never make anyone uncomfortable. Being liked is the lowest form of social currency. Being respected requires something entirely different. It requires that you be willing to be absent. Willing to be unavailable. Willing to let people feel the cost of your absence. Because only when people feel the cost of not having you do they understand your value. Here is how you apply this. After a conversation, a meeting, an interaction where you felt you made an impression, withdraw. Do not follow up immediately. Do not send the check-in message. Do not reinforce. Let them sit with the impression. Let it marinate. Let them wonder whether you are as interested as they thought. Let them question whether they read the interaction correctly. This uncertainty is not cruelty. It is strategy. You are not manipulating their emotions. You are simply refusing to manage their emotions for them. You are refusing to do the work of maintaining the connection while they do nothing. And in that refusal, something shifts. They start to invest. They start to reach out. They start to pursue. Because human beings pursue what retreats. They value what is scarce. They desire what might be taken away. This is the scarcity principle in its purest form, and it operates on a deeper level than any marketing tactic. It operates on the fundamental architecture of human motivation. We are wired to protect what we might lose. We are wired to chase what is moving away. We are wired to assign higher value to things that are harder to obtain. When you make yourself scarce, you are not playing hard to get. You are communicating something far more sophisticated. You are communicating that your time and attention have a cost. That you are not freely available to anyone who wants you. That accessing you requires effort. And effort creates investment. Investment creates commitment. Commitment creates control. Not the control of force. The control of desire. The control that makes people choose you of their own will, believing it was their idea all along. That is the highest form of power. Not compliance through force. Compliance through desire. Machiavelli understood that the most durable power is the power people surrender willingly. When you make someone desire your presence, they will do things for you that they would never do under coercion. They will make sacrifices. They will change plans. They will reorganize their priorities. And they will thank you for the opportunity. Not because you tricked them. Because you understood something about them that they do not understand about themselves. That their desire is not a response to what you give them. It is a response to what you withhold. Number 3. The reciprocity trap turns favors into leverage. Here is something that will change how you view every relationship in your life. When someone does you a favor, they are not being generous. They are making an investment. And they expect a return. This is not cynicism. This is the deepest, most universal social mechanism in human psychology. Reciprocity. The rule is simple. When we receive something, we feel obligated to give something back. And this obligation is so deeply wired into us that it can be triggered by things we did not even ask for. Someone does you an uninvited favor. They buy you a drink. They offer you a ride. They give you a small gift. They help you with something you did not need help with. And immediately, something shifts inside you. You feel a weight. A subtle pressure. A sense that you now owe them something. You did not ask for the favor. You did not want the favor. But the obligation is there, and it is real. This is how compliance professionals operate. They give before they ask. They create a debt before they call it in. And the insidious part is that the debt is always larger than the gift. A small favor creates a disproportionate sense of obligation. A free sample creates a pressure to buy. A small concession creates a pressure to reciprocate with a larger concession. This is the door-in-the-face technique. Someone asks you for something large, something they know you will refuse. Then they retreat to a smaller request. And because they made a concession by retreating, you feel obligated to make a concession by agreeing. You think you made a reasonable choice. You think you negotiated a fair outcome. What actually happened is they anchored you with an unreasonable request, then made you feel grateful for a smaller unreasonable request. And you said yes because they gave ground, even though the ground they gave was ground they never expected to hold in the first place. Now here is where this becomes a weapon you can use. Not just a trap you need to avoid, but a mechanism you can deploy. When you give strategically, you create leverage. The key word is strategically. Not generously. Not impulsively. Not because you are a good person. You give because you understand that giving creates obligation, and obligation creates access, and access creates control. You do a favor for someone before they ask. You offer something they need. You solve a problem they have been struggling with. And you do it without asking for anything in return. Not because you expect nothing. Because you expect something larger, later, on your terms. The person who receives your favor now owes you. They may not think of it in those terms. They may frame it as gratitude. But the mechanism is the same. They feel a pull to reciprocate. And when the time comes for you to make a request, they are predisposed to say yes. Not because your request is reasonable. Because they are discharging a debt. This is how power works in practice. Not through force. Not through threats. Through the quiet accumulation of obligations that you can call in at the moment of your choosing. But here is the other side. You need to recognize when this is being done to you. Because it is being done to you constantly. Every free sample, every complimentary consultation, every unsolicited piece of advice, every small favor from a colleague, every gift from someone who wants something from you later. These are not acts of kindness. They are deposits in an account they intend to withdraw from. And the withdrawal is always larger than the deposit. The strategic person does two things. First, they refuse uninvited favors. They do not accept the drink they did not ask for. They do not take the gift they did not want. They do not allow someone to create a debt without their consent. Second, they give strategically. They choose their favors the way a chess player chooses their moves. Not for immediate effect. For positional advantage. A favor given at the right moment to the right person creates more leverage than 1,000 arguments ever could. Because arguments engage resistance. Favors bypass it entirely. The person you favor does not see you as a threat. They see you as an ally. And they lower their defenses. And in that lowered state, you have access. Access to their decisions. Access to their loyalties. Access to their future choices. All from a favor that cost you almost nothing. This is the Machiavellian calculus. Small cost now. Large return later. The appearance of generosity. The reality of leverage. Number 4. The commitment chain turns small yes into prisons. Here is a psychological mechanism so powerful that once you understand it, you will see it operating everywhere. In every sales conversation. In every negotiation. In every relationship where one person slowly, imperceptibly gained control over another. It works like this. You get someone to agree to something small. Something almost trivially easy to say yes to. A tiny request. A minor concession. A small statement of agreement. And then, step by step, you escalate. Each new request is slightly larger than the last. But because they already said yes to the previous one, saying no to the next one would create a contradiction. And human beings hate contradiction. We have a deep psychological need to be consistent. Once we take a stand, once we make a commitment, once we declare ourselves to be a certain kind of person who does certain kinds of things, we will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain that identity. Even when the original reason for the commitment no longer exists. Even when the cost of continuing far exceeds the cost of stopping. Even when continuing is clearly against our own interests. This is the commitment and consistency principle, and it is one of the most dangerous mechanisms in human psychology. Because it does not feel like manipulation. It feels like choice. The person being led down the commitment chain believes they are making independent decisions at each step. They believe they are acting of their own free will. They do not realize that each yes was engineered by the previous yes, and that the entire trajectory was set by the first small agreement they barely thought about. Think about how this has been used on you. A relationship that started with small compromises and ended with you abandoning your own boundaries. A job that started with small favors and ended with you working weekends for free. A friendship that started with small accommodations and ended with you carrying the entire dynamic on your back. Each step seemed reasonable at the time. Each yes seemed like a small thing. But the chain was being built, link by link, and by the time you realized you were trapped, the chain was strong enough to hold you. Now flip this. Instead of being the victim of the commitment chain, become the architect. When you want someone to agree to something significant, do not ask for the significant thing first. Ask for something tiny. Something so small that refusing it would make them feel petty. Get the first yes. Then wait. Let the yes settle. Let it become part of their self-image. Let them start to see themselves as the kind of person who cooperates with you, who supports your goals, who is on your side. Then ask for the next thing. Slightly larger. Still reasonable. But moving in the direction you want. And because they already said yes once, saying yes again feels natural. It feels consistent. It feels like who they are. Each yes makes the next yes easier and the next no harder. Until eventually, they are so deeply committed to the trajectory that reversing course would require them to admit they were wrong at every previous step. And most people will never do that. Most people will continue down a wrong path indefinitely rather than admit they were wrong from the beginning. This is not a flaw. This is the consistency drive in action. And it is exploitable. But here is the defensive application, which is equally important. You must audit your own yes. Every time you agree to something small, ask yourself where this leads. Every time you make a minor commitment, ask what larger commitment this is building toward. Because the small yes is never just a small yes. The small yes is the first link in a chain that someone else is forging. And if you are not conscious of the chain being built around you, you will wake up one day trapped in a life you agreed to one tiny yes at a time. The strategic person never agrees to small requests without examining the trajectory. They understand that consistency is a trap when it is used against you and a weapon when you use it against others. And they choose, in every interaction, which side of that mechanism they want to be on. Number 5. Social proof lets others do your convincing for you. Here is something uncomfortable about human nature that you need to hear. People do not make decisions based on evidence. They make decisions based on what other people are doing. And then they construct evidence to justify the decision they already made. This is social proof. And it is the single most powerful force in group psychology. When people are uncertain, and they are almost always uncertain, they look around to see what everyone else is doing. And they copy it. Not because they have evaluated the options. Not because they have thought critically. Because they assume that if other people are doing it, it must be the right thing to do. This is a shortcut. A heuristic. A mental shortcut that usually works well enough that evolution kept it. But it is also a vulnerability that can be engineered. Here is how. You do not need to convince someone that you are valuable. You need to convince them that other people think you are valuable. Because if they believe others value you, they will value you. Not because of your qualities. Because of the perception of consensus. This is why social proof is so dangerous in the hands of someone who understands it. You do not need to argue your case. You need to create the appearance that your case has already been won. You do not need to prove your authority. You need to demonstrate that others already defer to you. You do not need to explain why you are right. You need to show that other people agree with you. And once that perception exists, it self-reinforces. People see that others are following you, so they follow you. Which makes more people see that others are following you, so more people follow you. It is a cascade. And it can be triggered by something as simple as who you stand next to, who you are seen with, whose name you drop casually in conversation, and whose attention you command without asking for it. Think about what this means in practice. When you walk into a room, people are watching. They are not watching you specifically. They are watching how others react to you. They are looking for signals of your status. Does the host greet you warmly? Do the important people acknowledge you? Does the room shift when you enter? These signals are social proof. And they are far more persuasive than anything you could say about yourself. This is why explaining yourself is so counterproductive. When you explain your value, you signal that your value needs explaining. Which means it is not obvious. Which means it is not consensus. Which means it is probably not real. But when you say nothing and others respond to you as though your value is obvious, you signal that your value is established. That it is recognized. That it is consensus. And consensus is the only proof most people need. The strategic person never argues their own case. They engineer situations where other people argue their case for them. They position themselves in proximity to people who already have authority. They create contexts where their value is demonstrated rather than declared. They let the room do the work. Because the room is more persuasive than any individual. The room has consensus. The room has social proof. And social proof bypasses critical thinking entirely. People do not evaluate the evidence when the crowd has already decided. They simply join the crowd. This is not about being fake. This is about understanding that perception creates reality. When people perceive that you are valued, they value you. When people perceive that you are followed, they follow you. When people perceive that you are powerful, they treat you as powerful. And how they treat you determines how much power you actually have. Power is not something you have. Power is something you are given by the perceptions of others. And you can shape those perceptions without saying a word. Number 6. Authority is signaled, not explained. Here is a truth that will make you uncomfortable. People do not respect expertise. They respect the appearance of expertise. And the appearance of expertise is communicated through symbols, not substance. Titles. Clothing. Body language. Tone. The speed at which you move. The space you take up. The way you enter a room. These are authority signals. And they trigger automatic compliance in most people without a single word being exchanged. Think about what happens when someone in a uniform tells you to do something. You do it. Not because you evaluated their competence. Because the uniform triggered your authority response. Your brain has a program that says, this person appears to be in charge, therefore I should comply. And this program runs automatically. It does not ask for your input. It does not wait for your evaluation. It sees the signal and it executes the compliance. This is the click and whir mechanism. A trigger feature activates a behavioral program, and the program runs to completion without conscious oversight. The strategic person understands this and engineers their authority signals deliberately. They do not try to convince people they are competent. They present the signals of competence and let the compliance program do the rest. How you carry yourself communicates more about your authority than any resume. When you move slowly, you signal that you are not rushed, that your time is valuable, that you are in control of the situation. When you make eye contact and hold it, you signal confidence and dominance. When you speak less and let others fill the space, you signal that your words have weight, that you do not need to talk to establish your position. When you do not react to provocation, you signal that you are above the game, that the provocateur is beneath you, that their attempt to destabilize you has failed before it began. All of this without saying a word. Now think about what you have been doing. You have been trying to establish your authority through explanation. You have been listing your qualifications. You have been making your case. You have been arguing your competence. And every time you do this, you signal the opposite of what you intend. You signal that your authority is in question. You signal that it needs to be established through argument. You signal that it is not obvious. And if it is not obvious, it is not real. Not in the minds of others. The person whose authority is real never argues for it. They simply embody it. They move through the world as though their position is established, and the people around them accept it because the signals are consistent. They do not ask for respect. They behave as though respect is already given, and so it is. This is the Stoic dimension of this principle. Marcus Aurelius did not need to announce his authority. He carried it in his composure. His power was not in his title. It was in his stillness. In his inability to be shaken. In the way he processed the world without being destabilized by it. That stillness is the ultimate authority signal. It says, I have seen everything you could possibly throw at me, and none of it moves me. That is power. Not the power of words. The power of unshakable composure. When you combine this with the other principles, something extraordinary happens. You walk into a room and you say nothing, and the room reshapes itself around you. Not because you demanded it. Because your signals triggered the compliance programs of everyone present. They saw your stillness as authority. They saw your silence as confidence. They saw your absence of explanation as evidence that you have nothing to prove. And they responded accordingly. You controlled the situation without saying a word. That is not a trick. That is the architecture of human perception. And now you know how to use it. Number 7. Scarcity turns you into an obsession. This is the culmination of everything we have covered. The final mechanism. The most powerful one. And the one that ties all the others together. Scarcity. Here is the principle. Human beings assign higher value to things that are rare, diminishing, or difficult to obtain. And this is not a preference. It is a compulsion. When something becomes scarce, two psychological mechanisms activate simultaneously. First, we assume that scarce things are better. If something is hard to get, there must be a reason. It must be higher quality. It must be more valuable. Otherwise it would not be scarce. This is a heuristic that usually works. Rare things are often valuable. But the heuristic can be triggered artificially. Create scarcity and you create perceived value. Second, we hate losing freedoms we already have. When something we could access becomes restricted, we experience psychological reactance. A motivation to reassert our freedom by obtaining the restricted thing. This is why limited time offers work. This is why exclusive memberships work. This is why countdown timers work. They are not creating value. They are creating the fear of losing access to value. And that fear is more motivating than any description of benefits could ever be. Now apply this to yourself. When you are always available, you are abundant. And abundant things are valued less. When you restrict your availability, you become scarce. And scarce things are valued more. But here is the deeper application. Scarcity is not just about availability. It is about attention. About emotional access. About the degree to which someone can reach you, predict you, and control you. When you make yourself emotionally scarce, when you do not give everyone access to your inner world, when you do not share your thoughts freely with anyone who asks, you become psychologically scarce. And psychologically scarce people are fascinating. They are mysterious. They are the object of speculation and projection. People fill in the gaps with their own desires and fantasies. They imagine that what is hidden must be extraordinary. They become obsessed with uncovering what you are withholding. And in that obsession, they give you power over them. Because the person who is sought after is always more powerful than the person who is seeking. This is the ultimate Machiavellian move. You do not chase. You withdraw. You do not persuade. You create the conditions where persuasion becomes unnecessary because the other person is already motivated by their own desire and their own fear of loss. You do not control through force. You control through the architecture of scarcity. You make yourself rare enough to be valued and present enough to be desired. And in that gap between rare and present, you hold all the power. Think about what happens when you combine all 7 of these principles. You are silent, which makes people reveal themselves. You are absent, which makes people desire you. You give strategically, which creates leverage. You engineer commitment chains, which locks people into trajectories you designed. You leverage social proof, which makes others argue your case. You signal authority without explaining it, which triggers automatic compliance. And you make yourself scarce, which turns you into an obsession. Each of these alone is powerful. Together, they form a system of influence that operates entirely without words. You do not need to argue. You do not need to explain. You do not need to persuade. You just need to be strategic about when you speak, when you withdraw, what you give, what you withhold, and how you carry yourself in the spaces between. Now I want you to think about something. Think about the cost of not knowing this. Every day you have been operating without these principles, you have been losing ground. You have been explaining yourself to people who were reading your explanations as weakness. You have been available to people who were devaluing you with every text you answered immediately. You have been accepting favors from people who were building leverage over you. You have been saying yes to small things that were leading you toward large commitments you never wanted. You have been arguing your own case while other people let the room argue theirs. You have been trying to prove your competence while others simply signaled it. And you have been abundant when you should have been scarce. All of this has a cost. The cost is not just lost opportunities. The cost is a life shaped by other people's decisions. A life where you are always reacting instead of directing. Always explaining instead of commanding. Always present instead of desired. Always liked instead of respected. And being liked is not being respected. Being liked is the consolation prize of people who were too afraid to be powerful. Here is what changes starting now. You stop explaining yourself. You stop being constantly available. You stop accepting uninvited favors. You stop saying yes to small commitments without examining where they lead. You stop arguing your own case. You stop trying to prove your value through words. Instead, you let silence do the work. You let absence create desire. You let strategic giving create leverage. You let commitment chains work in your favor. You let social proof build your case. You let authority signals trigger compliance. And you let scarcity turn you into someone people pursue rather than someone who pursues. This is not a personality change. This is a strategic shift. You are not becoming a different person. You are becoming a more deliberate version of the person you already are. A version that does not bleed power in every interaction. A version that does not hand over leverage for free. A version that understands that control is not about what you say but about what you make other people feel. And what you make them feel is determined not by your words but by your presence, your absence, your silence, and your composure. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. But there is a corollary he did not state explicitly. When you have power over your own mind, when you are not destabilized by the need to explain, justify, or defend, you project a stillness that others interpret as authority. And that interpretation gives you power over them. Not through manipulation. Through the simple fact that an unmoved person in a room full of moved people is automatically the most powerful person present. That is the Stoic foundation of the Machiavellian strategy. You do not need to scheme if you cannot be shaken. You do not need to manipulate if your composure alone is enough to command respect. The schemes and the strategies are layers on top of the foundation. The foundation is stillness. The foundation is the ability to sit in a silence that makes everyone else uncomfortable and feel nothing but calm. The foundation is the ability to walk away from a conversation and feel no pull to stay, no need to have the last word, no anxiety about what they think of you. When you have that foundation, everything else becomes optional. The strategies become tools you can pick up and put down as needed. Because the real power was never in the tools. It was in the person who does not need them. So here is where we end and where you begin. You started this video as someone who explained too much, cared too much about being understood, and gave away power in every interaction without realizing it. You are ending it as someone who understands that silence is pressure, absence is desire, scarcity is obsession, and composure is authority. The person who speaks least controls the most. The person who needs to be understood has no power. The person who can walk away from any conversation without feeling the need to return is the person everyone wants to return to. This is the ruthless art Machiavelli perfected. The art of controlling without commanding. Of influencing without arguing. Of making people choose you without knowing they were guided to that choice. And now it is yours. Not as theory. As practice. Starting with the next conversation you have. The next meeting you walk into. The next person who tries to provoke you into explaining yourself. You will hold your silence. You will hold your composure. You will let them fill the void. And you will watch, for the first time, what happens when you refuse to give away the thing you have been giving away your entire life. Your power. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you feel ready. Right now, in the very next interaction you have, you make one change. You say less than you normally would. You pause longer than is comfortable. You let the silence work. And if you understand what has been taken from you all these years by your need to speak, your need to explain, your need to be understood, then type 5 words in the comments right now. I am untouchable. Not because you are arrogant. Because you have decided, in this moment, that you will no longer be someone who hands over their power for free. The person who speaks least controls the most. That is the law. And now you know it. Go use it.